The ad was taped to the community board outside Henderson's grocery on a Tuesday morning, and Claire Merritt almost walked right past it. She had $3.40 in her pocket, a phone bill 2 weeks overdue, and a half-empty jar of peanut butter waiting for her at home, which was actually just the pull-out sofa in her cousin Dana's living room. She had learned, somewhere between losing her apartment and applying to her 14th job in 2 months, to stop reading bulletin boards. They never had anything good. But something made her pause. Maybe it was the clean white paper against the yellowed corkboard. Maybe it was the fact that someone had printed it in a real font instead of scrawling it by hand. Whatever the reason, Claire stopped, shifted her grocery bag to her left arm, and read. Seeking. Full-time live-in childcare for one child, age 6. Private residence, Midtown Manhattan. Immediate start. Compensation, $4, 200 month plus private room and meals. No agency, direct hire. References required. Apply in person. 57th floor, Hartwell Tower. Ask for Ms. Patricia Oakes. Claire read it twice, then a third time, $4,200 a month. A private room. Meals. She hadn't had a real meal in 4 days. Real meaning warm. Meaning something that wasn't crackers or peanut butter eaten standing over a sink. Her hands were cold, even though it was September, and the city was still technically holding on to summer. She pulled out her phone, photographed the ad, and told herself she'd think about it later. She was already walking toward the subway before she finished the thought. She thought about it the entire ride home. Claire was 24 years old and had a degree in early childhood education from Baruch College that was currently sitting in a manila folder under Dana's couch because she didn't have anywhere better to store it. She had spent 2 years teaching at a private preschool in Brooklyn before the school lost its lease and closed with 6 days' notice. Since then, she had applied to every school, every daycare, every tutoring center she could find. The economy wasn't kind to entry-level educators. Neither was New York City. She had been told twice that she was overqualified for an aide position and underexperienced for a lead teacher role, which she was fairly certain was just the polite way of saying that they had found someone cheaper. She had babysat through college. She was good with kids, more than good. She understood them in a way that some people understood music or numbers, instinctively, without having to think too hard about it. Children trusted her. She had that kind of face, Dana always said, open, honest, like she'd never once thought about lying to anyone. That was both a gift and a problem, depending on the day. The next morning, she wore her only blazer, charcoal gray, bought for a job interview 2 years ago, and took the subway to Midtown. Hartwell Tower was the kind of building that made you feel smaller just by looking at it. 60 stories of dark glass and steel rising out of the pavement like a declaration. The lobby had marble floors and a front desk staffed by 2 men in matching blazers who looked at her carry-on bag with barely concealed curiosity. "Claire Merritt," she said. "I'm here about the childcare position." One of the men made a phone call. She stood beside a potted orchid and tried not to look at her reflection in the polished elevator doors. Patricia Oakes turned out to be a compact woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and reading glasses pushed up on her forehead like a headband she'd forgotten about. She met Claire on the 57th floor in a conference room that had a view of Central Park that Claire suspected cost more per square foot than her entire education. The interview lasted 40 minutes. Ms. Oakes was precise and thorough. References, availability, experience with children who had behavioral needs, experience with highly structured households, comfort with confidentiality agreements. That last one caught Claire off guard. "Confidentiality?" Claire asked. "Mr. Hartwell is a private person," Ms. Oakes said simply. "The position requires discretion." "Hartwell," Claire repeated. "As in this building." "His grandfather built it," Ms. Oakes said. "The family has been in real estate and private equity for 3 generations. Nathan Hartwell currently runs Hartwell Capital." She said the name the way people said the name of a landmark. Not with pride exactly, but with the steady acknowledgement of something permanent. "His daughter's name is Lily. She's 6. Her mother passed away 18 months ago." Something shifted in Claire's chest. She didn't let it show on her face. "She's had 3 caregivers in the past year," Ms. Oakes continued, folding her hands on the table. Each one left within 2 months. I want to be transparent about that. Lily is not an easy child, not because she's badly behaved, but because she's grieving, and grief in a 6-year-old looks a great deal like chaos. I know, Claire said. Miss Oakes looked at her. You know, I lost my mom when I was 8, Claire said. I know what it looks like from the inside. There was a pause. Miss Oakes studied her for a moment, then made a small note on her legal pad. The job offer came the following afternoon by phone. Claire was at the laundromat, watching her last decent work shirt spin in a machine that smelled faintly of mildew. She said yes before Miss Oakes finished explaining the start date. She moved into Hartwell Tower 3 days later. The private residence occupied the top 2 floors of the building, the 59th and 60th, and was nothing like Claire had imagined, which was to say it looked lived in. Not messy, exactly, but not the sterile showroom she had expected. There were crayon drawings framed on the wall alongside museum prints. A pair of small sneakers had been kicked off in the entryway and never retrieved. The kitchen smelled like coffee and faintly like maple syrup. Someone had stacked picture books on the living room table, next to a copy of the Wall Street Journal, and the combination was so absurd and so human that Claire felt something loosen in her chest. Miss Oakes showed her to her room. It had a window, a real bed, a small desk, and a bathroom with actual hot water, and told her that Mr. Hartwell would be home by 7, and that Lily was currently with her afternoon art tutor. Claire met Lily first. The little girl appeared in the hallway at 5 o'clock like a small force of nature, dark curly hair escaping from 2 lopsided pigtails, paint on her left cheek, one sock on and one sock off, holding a piece of paper so aggressively that its corners were crumpled. She stopped when she saw Claire and stared with the completely unguarded intensity that only children under 7 could manage without being rude. "You're the new one," Lily said. "I am," Claire said. "I'm Claire." Lily considered this. "The last one cried in the bathroom." "That's fair," Claire said. "This is a big apartment." Lily looked at her for another long moment, then held out the crumpled piece of paper. It was a painting, blue and green and a streak of gold across the top, abstract in the way that children's art always was, which meant it contained something real that the painter didn't have words for yet. "I made the ocean," Lily said, "but I've never seen it." Claire looked at the painting and then at Lily, and felt that particular ache that comes with knowing something important before you can explain why. "We'll have to fix that," Claire said. Lily almost smiled. Then she turned and walked back down the hallway, sock on one foot, sock off the other, leaving a small paint smudge on the hardwood floor. Claire was still looking at the painting when the elevator doors behind her opened, and she turned to find Nathan Hartwell standing in his own entryway. He was taller than she expected, dark-haired, broad-shouldered, wearing a suit that looked like it had survived a long day, but hadn't surrendered to it. He had the kind of jaw that belonged in an old photograph, solid, deliberate, and eyes so dark they were almost black. He looked at her with an expression that gave nothing away, and Claire had the sudden, disorienting sense of being assessed by someone who was very good at it. "Ms. Merritt," he said. "Mr. Hartwell," she said. He looked at the painting still in her hands. "Lily gave you that?" he asked. "She showed me the ocean," Claire said. Something flickered across his face, too fast to name, gone before she could read it. He nodded once, set his briefcase down, and walked past her toward the kitchen without another word. Claire stood in the hallway of the most expensive apartment she had ever been inside, holding a child's painting of the ocean, listening to the distant sounds of the city 60 floors below. She had a feeling this job was going to be complicated. The first week at Hartwell Tower followed a rhythm that Claire learned quickly, the way you learned the layout of a dark room, not all at once, but by moving carefully and paying attention to where things hurt when you bumped into them. Nathan Hartwell left every morning at 6:45. She knew this because she heard the elevator doors, a soft, precise sound, like a period at the end of a sentence, before she was fully awake. He came home between 7 and 8 in the evening, sometimes later. On the 2 nights he came home past 9, Lily had already been asleep for an hour, and Claire had watched the little girl's face do something complicated when she realized at bedtime that her father wasn't going to come say good night. Lily didn't cry. She just pulled her blanket up to her chin and turned toward the wall and said very quietly, You can turn the light off now." Claire turned the light off and stood in the doorway for a moment longer than necessary. The rules of the household were delivered by Miss Oakes in a laminated document, 2 pages, single-spaced, on Claire's first morning. Lily's schedule was fixed. Breakfast at 7, educational activities until 10, outdoor time until noon, lunch, rest period, creative hour, dinner at 6. Meals were prepared by a rotating service. Claire's job was to be present, engaged, and consistent. Mr. Hartwell's spaces, his study on the upper floor, his private office off the main hallway, and the small sitting room with the view of the Hudson, were not to be entered without explicit invitation. Communication with Mr. Hartwell regarding household matters was to go through Ms. Oakes unless it was urgent, and she was unreachable. "What counts as urgent?" Claire had asked. "If Lily is injured," Ms. Oakes said, "or if something is on fire." It was meant, Claire thought, as a mild joke, but Patricia Oakes did not smile when she said it, so Claire wrote it down and moved on. The distance Nathan Hartwell maintained was not unkind, exactly. He was not cold in the way that some wealthy people were cold, performatively, as though warmth were a resource too precious to waste on people they were paying. He was more like a man who had built very specific walls around very specific rooms and had no intention of inviting anyone to inspect the blueprints. He said good morning to Claire when he passed her in the kitchen. He asked twice in the first week whether Lily had eaten well. He did not ask about Claire herself, not where she was from, not how she was settling in, not whether the room suited her. She was, she understood, a function, a necessary and well-compensated function, but a function nonetheless. She told herself this was fine. She had not come here to be known. She had come here for the paycheck and the warm room and the small painted ocean hanging above her desk. Lily was a different matter entirely. The little girl was, as Miss Oakes had warned, a kind of organized chaos, but the more time Claire spent with her, the more she recognized the logic underneath it. Lily didn't have meltdowns randomly. She had them when transitions happened too fast, when plans changed without explanation, when she felt like she was being managed rather than talked to. She had inherited, it seemed, her father's profound distaste for being handled. Claire adapted. She started giving 5-minute warnings before any change in activity. She explained things instead of simply directing them. She asked Lily what she wanted for lunch instead of presenting it as a given, which was a small shift that produced, in the first week alone, 3 genuine smiles and 1 enthusiastic opinion about grilled cheese that made Claire laugh out loud in a way that echoed in the big, quiet kitchen. On Thursday of the second week, Claire asked Lily what her favorite game was. Lily thought about it with the gravity of a diplomat considering a treaty. "The card game," she said, "but Daddy doesn't know how to play." "Which card game?" "Go fish." Lily looked at her with those dark eyes that were so much like Nathan's. It was occasionally startling. He always mixes up the numbers. He says 7 and holds up an 8. "I think he does it on purpose, so I'll laugh." Claire smiled. "Does it work?" Lily considered this very seriously. "Sometimes," she admitted. It was the first time Lily had mentioned her father in a way that wasn't shadowed by his absence. Claire filed it away carefully, the image of Nathan Hartwell deliberately miscounting cards to make his daughter laugh. It didn't fit the laminated document. It didn't fit the briefcase and the 645 elevator and the walls around the study. But it was real, and Claire was learning to track the real things in this apartment, the way you tracked light in a room with the curtains mostly closed, by the thin lines that made it through. The shift happened on a Friday evening, 2 weeks in. Lily had a nightmare at 4 in the morning. Claire heard it through the baby monitor Miss Oakes had installed. A sharp cry followed by sobbing, and was at Lily's door before she was fully awake herself. She sat on the edge of the little girl's bed and let her cry until the crying slowed, then quietly asked if she wanted to talk about it. "Mama was in it," Lily said. Claire didn't say anything. She put her hand over Lily's and waited. "In the dream she was standing far away, and I kept running, but I couldn't get to her." Lily's voice was very small. "Do you know that kind, where you run but you don't move?" "I know exactly that kind," Claire said. They sat quietly for a while. Claire started humming, nothing planned, just a soft, shapeless melody her own mother used to hum, and Lily gradually settled, her breathing slowing, her grip on Claire's hand loosening as sleep came back for her. Claire didn't notice Nathan in the doorway until she turned to leave. He was standing there in a grey t-shirt and sweatpants, which was so far from the suit and briefcase version of him that she almost didn't recognize him. He had clearly heard Lily cry and come from the upper floor. His expression, for once, was not carefully neutral. He looked like a man who had been standing outside a door he didn't know how to open. He looked at Claire with something she couldn't quite name. "She's asleep," Claire whispered. He nodded. He looked past her at Lily, small in the big bed, one hand curled under her cheek, and something in his face shifted in a way that was almost painful to witness. Raw, unguarded, utterly unlike the man in the laminated document. "She does this sometimes," he said very quietly, "since Rachel died." Rachel. The name landed softly in the room. Claire had not heard him say his late wife's name before. "I know," Claire said. "She told me about the dream." He looked at her. "She told you?" "She did." There was a pause. He looked back at Lily, then at the floor between them. "She doesn't tell me about the dreams," he said. It wasn't an accusation. It was quieter than that. It was the sound of a man noticing a door he hadn't known was closed to him. Claire didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing, which was sometimes the right answer. She slipped past him into the hallway, and he stayed a moment longer in the doorway before following. In the hallway they stood awkwardly for a moment, in the way that two people stand when the formality between them has briefly dissolved and neither of them is sure how to put it back. "Thank you," Nathan said. "That's what I'm here for," Claire said. It was the exact right thing to say, and somehow also the exact wrong thing, and she felt it as she walked back down the hall to her room, the small, precise sting of her own words. She lay in the dark and listened to the city 60 floors below and told herself firmly and clearly that this was a job. That warmth was not proximity, that a man who could not talk to his daughter about her nightmares was not her problem to solve, that the way he had looked at Lily in that doorway, fierce and helpless and full of a love too large for his controlled vocabulary, was none of her business. She believed most of it. On Monday morning he left at 6:45 as always, but at 6:44 he paused in the kitchen where Claire was making coffee and said without looking up from his phone, "Lily mentioned you told her you'd show her the ocean someday." "I did," Claire said. He was quiet for a moment. Then, "She hasn't left the city in 2 years." The elevator doors closed behind him before she could respond. The trip to the ocean was Nathan's idea, which surprised Claire more than she let on. It came on a Wednesday morning, delivered not through Ms. Oakes and not through a laminated document, but directly, in person, in the kitchen, while Lily was still asleep. Nathan was already in his suit, charcoal today, white shirt open at the collar, the same expensive watch he wore every day. And he set a coffee cup on the counter and said, without preamble, "I've cleared my schedule for this weekend. I thought we could take Lily to Cape Cod." Claire looked up from the breakfast she was preparing. "We," she said. "She'd want you there," he said. It wasn't quite an answer, but he didn't seem to notice that. He picked up his briefcase and added, "Ms. Oakes will handle the arrangements. Pack for 3 nights. And then he was gone, and Claire was standing in the kitchen holding a spatula and trying to determine whether she had just been invited on a family vacation or assigned to one. She decided the distinction didn't matter and packed accordingly. They drove up Friday afternoon, a black SUV, a driver named Gerald, who communicated exclusively through polite nods. Lily strapped into the back seat between Claire and a tote bag full of activity books that she ignored entirely in favor of pressing her face against the window and asking questions about every single thing she saw. What's that building for? Why is that bridge that color? How long is the ocean? Does the ocean have a bottom? It does, Claire told her. The deepest part is called the Mariana Trench. It's almost 7 miles down. Lily turned from the window with eyes like saucers. 7 miles? 7 miles. Lily turned to her father, who was sitting in the front passenger seat with his phone in his hand, and Claire noticed, not actually looking at it. "Daddy, did you know that?" "I did," Nathan said. "How deep have people gone?" He paused. Claire could see the slight turn of his head, as though the question required more than a casual answer. "There have been a few submersibles that reached the bottom," he said. "The pressure down there is about 1,000 times what you feel on the surface." Lily absorbed this. "I want to go," she announced. "To the bottom of the ocean," Nathan said. "Yes, let's start with the surface," he said, and the corner of his mouth moved in a way that was not quite a smile, but was the architecture of one. And Claire looked out her own window so she didn't have to think about it. The house in Cape Cod was not a rental. That became obvious the moment they arrived. A weathered, shingled house set back from the beach, the kind of house that had been in a family for decades, that had absorbed 30 years of salt air and summer evenings, and sand tracked across hardwood floors. There were photographs on the mantel, a child's growth chart penciled on the inside of a pantry door, books dog-eared and sun-faded on the shelves. It felt nothing like the Midtown apartment, and everything like something Nathan Hartwell had never meant to show anyone. Lily saw the water from the porch and made a sound Claire had never heard from her before, a short, involuntary gasp, pure and unguarded. And then she turned to Claire with an expression so open it was almost difficult to look at. "It's real," Lily said. "It's real," Claire confirmed. Lily ran down the porch steps in her sneakers before anyone could suggest she change into sandals. They spent the afternoon on the beach. Lily collected shells with the systematic focus of a scientist, presenting each one to Claire for identification, which meant Claire invented confident-sounding names for at least 6 species she was fairly certain she'd made up. Lily recorded them all in a small notebook she had brought without being asked, which was, Claire thought, the most Nathan Hartwell thing she had ever seen a 6-year-old do. Nathan sat further up the beach, jacket off for the first time she could remember, sleeves rolled to the elbow, ostensibly reading something on his phone. But every few minutes Claire caught him watching Lily with that same expression from the hallway outside his daughter's bedroom. Fierce, helpless, enormous. At some point Lily abandoned the shells and ran toward the water, which was cold enough in September that she shrieked when it touched her ankles, then immediately ran back in. Claire waded in beside her. The water was freezing and the wind was sharp, and she didn't care at all because Lily was laughing, fully, completely, without reservation, the kind of laugh that didn't have anything to protect. She didn't realize Nathan had walked down to the water's edge until she turned around. He was standing just at the tide line with his shoes still on, which somehow seemed like the bravest thing she'd ever seen him do. And he was watching his daughter laugh in the Atlantic Ocean, and his face was completely undefended. That evening, after Lily had been put to bed, exhausted, sandy, happy in a way that softened every sharp edge of her small face, Claire found Nathan on the back porch with a glass of wine and the kind of stillness that wasn't peace but was something working toward it. He offered her a glass without asking if she wanted one. She sat down in the chair beside him. They looked at the water for a while. The moon was high and generous, spreading itself across the surface of the ocean in a wide, shifting path. "She's going to talk about this for months," Claire said. "I know," he said. He paused. "I should have brought her sooner." It wasn't self-pity. It was just a fact he was setting down carefully, the way you set down something fragile. "You're here now," Claire said. He turned to look at her then. Really look, not the assessing glance from the lobby or the careful neutrality of the kitchen. Something else. Something that stayed too long to be accidental. "She told me," he said, "that you hum to her when she has the dream." Claire felt her face warm slightly. "I didn't know she noticed." "Lily notices everything," he said. "She just chooses carefully what she tells you." He looked back at the water. "She told me your mother died when you were young." "I told her that," Claire said. "I didn't think she'd pass it along. She said it made her feel less alone," Nathan said quietly. The wind moved between them. The ocean shifted its weight against the shore. Claire said nothing. She had learned, in the past 3 weeks, that Nathan Hartwell said important things in a particular way, plainly without decoration, as though he had rehearsed the sentence until it was stripped of everything unnecessary. It meant you had to listen for the thing underneath. The thing underneath, Claire thought, was, "Thank you for giving my daughter something I didn't know how to give her." What she said was, "She's an extraordinary kid." "She is," he agreed. "She gets it from her mother." Another silence. This one was different, not empty, but full of something that neither of them reached for. It was Nathan who broke it. "Can I ask you something personal?" he said. "You can ask," she said. "Why childcare?" he said. "You have a degree, you could be teaching." "I'm trying to get back into teaching," she said. "It's harder than it used to be. The jobs aren't there." He nodded slowly. "So this is temporary." She looked at him. "That's what it was supposed to be." He held her gaze for a moment, then looked away. The next morning, everything was different in a way that neither of them addressed directly. He made coffee before Gerald arrived to drive Lily to a local art class Ms. Oakes had arranged, and he made enough for two, and he set Claire's cup on the counter in the place where she always stood without being asked, without comment. It was such a small thing, the kind of thing that only meant something if you were paying attention. Claire was paying attention. She was paying attention on Sunday afternoon when Lily fell asleep in the car on the way back to the city, and Nathan turned down the radio without being asked. And for 40 minutes they drove in silence through the thinning autumn countryside, and it was the most comfortable silence Claire had ever sat inside. She was paying attention when they reached the city, and the skyline rose around them, and Nathan looked at her in the rearview mirror, just for a second, just a glance, and she felt it land somewhere behind her sternum, like a key, turning in a lock she hadn't known was there. She was still paying attention on Monday morning, when Ms. Oakes called her into the sitting room with the Hudson view and closed the door, and said, in her precise and careful way, that there was something Claire needed to know about why the previous 3 caregivers had really left. Ms. Oakes sat with her hands folded on her knees and her reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, and told Claire the truth in the same measured way she delivered schedules and household policies, as though the facts were simply facts and the weight of them was Claire's to manage. The 3 previous caregivers had not left because of Lily. The first had developed feelings for Nathan and made them known directly. A letter slipped under his study door, and had been let go the following morning with a full month's severance and a carefully worded conversation from Ms. Oakes about professional boundaries. The second had sold a photograph of Lily to a gossip publication, a minor tabloid that ran a story about Nathan Hartwell's troubled home life with enough detail to confirm an inside source. The third had lasted 6 weeks before confiding to a friend, who confided to a journalist, that Nathan was clearly not over his wife, and that the apartment felt like a museum to a woman nobody was allowed to mention. That story had also been published. Nathan had found out about all 3 within days of each incident. He had responded to each by saying nothing, doing what was necessary, and adding another layer to the walls. "I'm telling you this," Ms. Oakes said, "because you are not like the others, and I think you deserve to know what you're walking inside of." Claire sat with this for a moment. "You think I'm developing feelings for him," she said. Ms. Oakes did not look away. "I think the situation has the conditions for it," she said carefully. Cape Cod was his idea. In 4 years of employing household staff, Nathan Hartwell has never included anyone in a family trip. He has never made coffee for anyone in that kitchen except himself and Lily. She paused. "I've worked for this family for 11 years. I know what his patterns look like when they change." Claire looked at the Hudson through the window, grey and wide and moving without hurry. "I'm not going to sell a photograph," she said. "I know that," Ms. Oakes said, "and I'm not going to slip a letter under anyone's door." "I know that too." Ms. Oakes unfolded her hands and stood. "I just want you to understand that he will not make it easy. Not because he doesn't feel things, but because the last time he let himself feel things openly, he lost the person he was feeling them for, and Nathan Hartwell does not know how to survive something twice." She left Claire alone in the sitting room with the Hudson and the information and the particular stillness that comes after something true has been said out loud. Claire told herself for the next 2 weeks that she was being professional. She was warm with Lily and correct with Nathan. She did not seek him out. She did not engineer moments. She kept to the schedule, respected the laminated document, and reminded herself regularly that she had come to this apartment with $3.40 in her pocket, and she could not afford financially, professionally, emotionally, to complicate the only stable thing she had. But stability, she was learning, was not the same as stillness. Things moved inside a stable structure. They shifted and settled and found new arrangements. Lily started sleeping through the night. Not every night, but most of them. And on the nights when the dream came back, she called for Claire, and Claire came, and the humming worked, and by October, it was working faster. Claire told Nathan about this on a Thursday evening when he came home at 6:30, early, increasingly early, a pattern shift she was trying not to notice. And he stood in the kitchen doorway and listened and said, "What changed?" "Routine," Claire said. "Predictability. She knows what's coming next, so the nights feel less like falling." He was quiet for a moment. That's what she needed. "That's what most people need," Claire said. He looked at her in that direct, unguarded way that had become more frequent since Cape Cod. "What do you need?" he asked. The question was so unexpected that she laughed, a short, surprised sound, and he blinked, and then something happened that she had not seen before. Nathan Hartwell looked embarrassed. Just for a second. A faint warmth at the edges of his composed expression, his eyes dropping briefly to the counter between them. "I'm sorry," he said. I don't know why I asked that." "Don't apologize," she said. "No one's asked me that in a while." He looked up. "And?" She considered it honestly. "A library card," she said. "A library card and about 3 more of Lily's grilled cheese lunches because she's ruined me for sandwiches made by anyone else." He almost laughed. She heard it, the breath of it, almost there. And it felt like watching a window come open in a house that had been shut up for a long time. The thing that broke everything open happened on a Tuesday in the lobby of Hartwell Tower, and Claire wasn't even supposed to be there. She had taken Lily to an afternoon art class 3 blocks away, and they had come back through the lobby because the side entrance was blocked for a delivery. And in the lobby near the front desk was a woman Claire didn't recognize, tall, polished, the kind of effortlessly composed that took considerable effort, speaking to Nathan in a low voice with the familiarity of someone who had known him a long time. Nathan's posture was different from usual, tighter, careful in a different way. Lily stopped walking. Claire felt it, the small hand in hers going rigid, before she understood why. "That's Aunt Diana," Lily said. Claire had never heard the name before. She looked at Lily's face and saw something she had not seen since the first night, that particular closed expression, the turn toward the wall expression. "Do you want to go say hello?" Claire asked quietly. "No," Lily said. They went upstairs through the elevator, and Claire did not ask any more questions. She gave Lily a snack and set up the card game and let the afternoon move forward without pressing on anything. But that evening, after Lily was in bed, Nathan came to find her, which he had not done before, always waiting for her to appear rather than seeking her out. And he sat down at the kitchen table with the expression of a man who had made a decision about something and was still adjusting to having made it. "Diana is Rachel's sister," he said. "She's been telling certain people who matter to board members of the firm, that I'm not in a fit state to be running a company, that the grief has affected my judgment. She believes Lily should come live with her in Boston." Claire set down her tea. "She's trying to take Lily. She hasn't filed anything formal, but her attorney made contact with mine last week." His jaw tightened. "She believes that a child being raised by a rotating series of paid caregivers in an apartment without a stable maternal figure is grounds for a custody conversation." The room was quiet for a moment. "Lily is thriving," Claire said. Her voice was steady, but the steadiness cost her something. "I know that," Nathan said. "You know that. Lily knows that." He looked at her. "I need someone to say it in a room where it counts." 2 days later, Claire sat in the office of Nathan's family attorney, a composed woman named Margaret Chen, and answered questions about Lily's daily life, her emotional progress, her sleep patterns, her appetite, her laughter. She spoke for 40 minutes and did not exaggerate a single word. She said that Lily was a child who was healing, not finished, not fixed, but healing, and that healing was not the absence of grief, but the presence of enough safety to feel it without being destroyed by it. Margaret Chen wrote things down and nodded and said at the end, "You clearly love her." Claire opened her mouth to say something professional and correct. "Yes," she said instead. "I do." Diana's attorney sent a letter 3 weeks later withdrawing the inquiry. Margaret Chen called Nathan to deliver the news, and Nathan walked into the kitchen where Claire was making lunch and stood across the island and said, "It's over, she's withdrawing." Claire exhaled. "Claire," Nathan said. She looked at him. "I don't know how to do this," he said. "I want to be transparent about that. I don't know how to do any of this." He gestured vaguely, which she understood to mean not the legal situation, but everything else. The coffee made for two. The Cape Cod porch, the window coming open. "But I'd like to try if that's something you'd consider." She looked at him for a long moment, this controlled, careful, quietly devoted man who miscounted cards on purpose to make his daughter laugh and made enough coffee for two before he knew he was doing it. "I'd consider it," she said. He nodded, and then, for the first time since she had come to Hartwell Tower, Nathan Hartwell smiled. Fully, completely, without anything held back. And it was so different from all the almost smiles she had catalogued that Claire felt it like the first warm day after a long winter. Lily appeared in the kitchen doorway in one sock, as was apparently her custom, holding a new painting, red and orange and a streak of brilliant yellow across the top. "I made the sunrise," she announced, "because Claire said every ocean has one." Nathan looked at Claire. Claire looked at Lily. "Can we go see a real one?" Lily asked. "Yes," Claire said. And then she looked at Nathan, and he was already nodding, and the answer was the same from all three of them, at the same moment, for the first time. Outside, 60 floors below, the city moved in its ceaseless way, indifferent, enormous, full of bulletin boards and $3 mornings and small white pieces of paper that changed everything. Claire thought about the girl who had almost walked past the ad at Henderson's grocery. She was glad she had stopped.